Hey everybody, how's everybody doing tonight? So tonight I'm gonna have to allow you to record. There you go. Did he give you permission?
Yeah, I'm recording.
Good. Okay, so tonight we're doing chapter 25 of Canto 3, the glories of devotional service, which are amazing, and we'll discuss that. And then chapter 26, uh, the fundamental principles of material nature. So the fundamental principles of material nature. So these are two really good chapters of the incarnation of Lord Kapila, who came to teach the Sankhya Yoga philosophy, which is the philosophy of devotional yoga mixed with mystic realization, actually. So it's quite knowledgeable. So you're going to get some very, very deep insight, understanding to the nature of the universe, creation of the universe, the purpose of all of these things, purpose of the Lord appearing, and so forth and so on out of these next few chapters. And it'll be a part of the book for the avatar of Lord Kapila. So we're very glad that everybody's here to help with that. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhuttade Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devim Gaurivani Paricharane Nirvishesha Shingivani Paschachari Shatane. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Gadadhar Shivasti Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 25. We have about 100 verses. So I'll take 20 or 25, and Rangavati, you take some, and then Nishringa, you can grab some. Anybody else who wants some at that time as well. So text 1, Sri Sonaka said, although he is unborn, the Supreme Personality of Godhead took birth as Kapila Muni by his internal potency. He descended to disseminate transcendental knowledge for the benefit of the whole human race. Sonaka continued, there is no one who knows more than the Lord himself. No one is more worshipable or more mature a yogi than he. He is therefore the master of the Vedas, and to hear about him always is the actual pleasure of the senses. Therefore, please precisely describe all the activities and pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who is full of self-desire and assumes all these activities by his internal potency. Sri Sudha Goswami said, the most powerful sage Maitreya was a friend of Vyasadeva. Being encouraged and pleased by Vidura's inquiry about the transcendental knowledge, Maitreya spoke as follows. Maitreya said, when Kardama left for the forest, Lord Kapila stayed on the strand of the Bindu Sarovara to please his mother, Devahuti. When Kapila, who could show her the ultimate goal of the absolute truth, was sitting leisurely before her, Devahuti remembered the words Brahma had spoken to her, and she therefore began to question Kapila as follows. Devahuti said, I'm very sick of the disturbance caused by my material senses. For because of this sense disturbance, my lord, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance. Your lordship is my only means of getting out of this darkest region of ignorance, because you are my transcendental eye, which by your mercy only I have attained after many, many births. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the origin and Supreme Lord of all living entities. You have arisen to disseminate the rays of the sun in order to dissipate the darkness of the ignorance of the universe. Now be pleased, my Lord, to dispel my great delusion. Due to my feeling of false ego, I have been engaged by your Maya and have identified myself with the body and consequently bodily relations. Devahuti continued, I have taken shelter of your lotus feet because you're the only person of whom to take shelter. You are the axe which can cut the tree of material existence. I therefore offer my obeisances unto you, who are the greatest of all transcendentalists. And I inquire from you as to the relationship between man and woman and between spirit and matter. Maitreya said, after hearing of his mother's uncontaminated desire, for transcendental realization, the Lord thanked her within himself for her questions, and thus, his face smiling, he explained the path of the transcendentalists who are interested in self-realization. The personality of Godhead answered, the yoga system which relates to the Lord and to the individual soul, which is meant for the ultimate benefit of the living entity, and which causes detachment from all happiness and distress in the material world, is the highest yoga system. O most pious mother, I shall now explain to you the ancient yoga system, which I explained formerly to the great sages. It is serviceable and practical in every way. The sage in which the consciousness of the living entity is attracted by the three modes of material nature is called conditional life. But when that same consciousness is attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is situated in the consciousness of liberation. When one is completely cleansed of the impurities of lust and greed produced from the false identification of the body as, quote, I, unquote, and bodily possessions as, quote, mine, unquote, one's mind becomes purified. In that pure state, he transcends the stage of so-called material happiness and distress. At that time, the soul can see himself to be transcendental to the material existence and always self-effulgent, never fragmented, although very minute in size. In that position of self-realization, by practice of knowledge and renunciation and devotional service, one sees everything in the right perspective. He becomes indifferent to material existence, and the material influence acts less powerfully upon him. Perfection in self-realization cannot be attained by any kind of yogi unless he engages in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for that is the only auspicious path. So does anybody like to read a few from here, text 20?
I can take some if you want.
Go for it. Take about 20.
Okie dokie. Where
So
did you
this
finish? You finished at 20, didn't you?
text 20.
Oh, I started 20. Every learned man knows very well that attachment for the material is the greatest entanglement of the spirit soul. But that same attachment, when applied to the self-realized devotees, opens the door of liberation. The symptoms of a sadhu are that he is tolerant, merciful, and friendly to all living entities. He has no enemies. He is peaceful. He abides by the scriptures, and all his characteristics are sublime. Such a sadhu engages in staunch devotional service to the Lord without deviation. For the sake of the Lord, he renounces all other connections, such as family relationships and friendly acquaintances within the world. Engaged constantly in chanting and hearing about me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sadhus do not suffer from material miseries because they are always filled with thoughts of my pastimes and activities. O my mother, O virtuous lady, these are the qualities of great devotees who are free from all attachment. You must seek attachment to such holy men, for this counteracts the pernicious effects of material attachment. In the association of pure devotees, discussions of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed from his attraction, and thereafter he is freed, and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begins. Thus consciously engaged in devotional service, in the association of devotees, a person gains distaste for sense gratification, both in this world and in the next, by constantly thinking about the activities of the Lord. This process of Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of mystic power. When one is actually situated on that path of devotional service, he is able to control the mind. Thus, by not engaging in the service of the modes of material nature, but by developing Krishna consciousness, knowledge, in renunciation, and by practicing yoga, in which the mind is always fixed in devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one achieves my association in this very life, for I am the Supreme Personality, the Absolute Truth. On hearing this statement of the Lord, Devahuti inquired, what kind of devotional service is worth developing and practicing to help me easily and immediately attain the service of your lotus feet? The mystic yoga system, as you have explained, aims at the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is meant for completely ending material existence. Please let me know the nature of that yoga system. How many ways are there by which one can understand in truth that sublime yoga? My dear son, Kapila, after all, I am a woman. It is very difficult for me to understand the absolute truth because my intelligence is not very great. But if you will kindly explain it to me, even though I'm not very intelligent, I can understand it and thereby feel transcendental happiness. Sri Maitreya said, after hearing the statement of his mother, Kapila could understand her purpose, and he became compassionate towards her. Because of being born of her body, he described the Sankhya system of philosophy, which is a combination of devotional service and mystic realization, as received by disciplic succession. Lord Kapila said, the senses are symbolic representations of the demigods, and their natural inclination is to work under the direction of the Vedic injunctions. As the senses are representatives of the demigods, so the mind is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The mind's natural duty is to serve. When that service spirit is engaged in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead without any motive, that is far better even than salvation. Bhakti, devotional service, dissolves the subtle body of the living entity without separate effort. Dissolves the subtle body. Okay. Just as fire in the stomach digests all that we eat. Maybe you can discuss that because I don't quite understand that. A pure devotee who is attached to the activities of devotional service and who always engages in the service of my lotus feet never desires to become one with me. Such a devotee who is unflinchingly engaged always glorifies my pastimes and activities. O my mother, my devotees always see the smiling face of my form, with eyes like the rising morning sun. They like to see my various transcendental forms, which are all benevolent, and they also talk favorably with me. Upon seeing the charming forms of the Lord, smiling and attractive, and hearing his very pleasing words, the pure devotee almost loses all consciousness. His senses are freed from all other engagements, and he becomes absorbed in devotional service. Thus, in spite of his unwillingness, he attains liberation without separate endeavor. Thus, because he is completely absorbed in thought of me, the devotee does not desire even the highest benediction obtainable in the upper planetary systems, including Satyaloka. He does not desire the 8 material perfections obtained from mystic yoga, nor does he desire to be elevated to the kingdom of God. Yet, even without desiring them, the devotee enjoys, even in this life, all the offered benedictions. The Lord continued, my dear mother, devotees who receive such transcendental opulences are never bereft of them. Neither weapons nor the change of time can destroy such opulences. Because the devotees accept me as their friend, their relative, their son, preceptor, benefactor, and supreme deity, they cannot be deprived of their possessions at any time. Thus, the devotee who worships me, the all-pervading Lord of the universe, in unflinching devotional service, given up all aspirations to be promoted to heavenly planets, or to become happy in this world with wealth, children, cattle, home, or anything in relationship with the body, I take him to the other side of birth and death. I think that's my full tip.
That's beautiful, man. Yeah, I love that. Okay. That's some good stuff right there.
Does
Okay.
Bob want to go?
I can try to read
Oh.
some.
Here you go, whilst he's there.
Okay, Bob, you go next, and then after that, we're going to get Nishringa on there. I don't know if Sue Davy can
Yes,
read
it is.
tonight. If she can read tonight, we'd like to have her also. So, Bob and Ananda, pick out 10 or 15, whatever feels good to you.
41. The terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone who resorts to any shelter other than myself. For I am the Almighty Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original source of all creation, and also the Supreme Soul of all souls. It is because of my supremacy that the wind blows out of fear of me. The sun shines out of fear of me, and the Lord of the clouds, Indra, sends forth showers out of fear of me. Fire burns out of fear of me, and death goes about taking its toll out of fear of me. The yogis, equipped with transcendental knowledge and renunciation, and engaged in devotional service for their eternal benefit, take shelter of my lotus feet. And since I am the Lord, they are thus eligible to enter the kingdom of Godhead without fear. Therefore, persons whose minds are fixed on the Lord engage in the intensive practice of devotional service. That is the only means for attainment of the final perfection of life. And into the chapter.
Yeah.
Chapter 26.
Yeah, there's about 70 plus verses in this chapter. So you can take another 10 or 15 if you'd like to, Bob. And then Nishringa, if you don't mind, take at least 20, 25, something like that. And if Sue Dave can read, I don't know if she can or not, but if she can
Yes.
read.
Can you, is the third canto?
I hear you. You're perfect. Yeah. So we'll call on you in a minute, Sue Dave, if you don't mind.
Yeah, but third canto, what the next chapter? Third.
Chapter
26.
26, third canto, chapter 26, fundamental principles of material nature. That's where we are right now. And Bob and I'm just going to read a few more. Okay. And then we'll call on both you and Nishringa. Thank you, Sue Dave.
Text 1. Personality of Godhead, Kapila, continued. My dear mother, now I shall describe unto you the different categories of the absolute truth, knowing which any person can be released from the influence of the modes of material nature. Knowledge of this ultimate perfection of self-realization, I shall explain that knowledge unto you by which the knots of attachment to the material world are cut. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supreme Soul, and he has no beginning. He is transcendental to the material modes of nature and beyond the existence of this material world. He is perceivable everywhere because he is self-effulgent, and by his self-effulgent luster, the entire creation is maintained. As his pastime, that Supreme Personality of Godhead, the greatest of the great, accepted the subtle material nature, which is invested with three material modes of nature, and which is related to Vishnu. Divided into vulgarities by her threefold modes, material nature creates the forms of the living entities, and the living entities, seeing this, are illusioned by the knowledge-covering features of illusionary energy. Because of his forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of material nature, accepts the influence of material energy as his field of activities, and thus actuated, he wrongly applies the activities to himself. Material consciousness is the cause of one's conditional life, in which conditions are enforced upon the living entity by the material energy. Although the spirit soul does not do anything and is transcendental to such activities, he is thus affected by conditional life. The cause of the conditional soul's material body and senses, and the senses presiding deities, the demigods, is the material nature. This is understood by learned men. The feelings of happiness and distress of the soul, who is transcendental by nature, are caused by the spirit soul himself. I'm starting to lose my voice, so I think I'll stop there.
Do you want to start something?
Okay. All right. Thank you, Bhavananda. That was very nice. Thank you. And who else do we have? Nishinga, you want to read some from here? Or Sudev, you want to go first? Whatever you guys decide.
I'll read, Prabhuji.
Okay, thank you.
Devahuti said, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies, for both of these are the causes of this manifest and unmanifest creation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifest state and is called Pradhana. It is called Prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. The aggregate elements, namely the 5 gross elements, the 5 subtle elements, and the 4 internal senses, and 5 senses for gathering knowledge, and 5 outward organs of action, are known as Pradhana. Therefore, there are 5 gross elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. There are also 5 subtle elements, smell, taste, color, touch, and sound. The senses for acquiring a knowledge and the organs for action number 10, namely the auditory sense, the sense of taste, the tactile sense, the sense of sight, the sense of smell, the active organ for speaking, the active organ for working, and those for traveling, generating, and evacuating. The internal subtle senses are experienced as having 4 aspects in the shape of mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness. Distinction between them can be made only by different functions, since they represent different characteristics. All these are considered the qualified Brahmana, the mixing element, Brahman. The mixing element, which is known as time, is counted as the 25th element. The influence of Supreme Personality of Godhead is felt in the time factor, which causes a fear of death due to the false ego of the deluded soul who has contacted material nature. My dear mother, O daughter of Swayambhuva Manu, the time factor, as I have explained, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom the creation begins as a result of the agitation of the neutral, unmanifested nature. By exhibiting his potencies, the Supreme Personality of Godhead adjusts all these different elements, keeping himself within as the super soul and without as time. After the Supreme Personality of Godhead impregnates material nature with his internal potency, material nature delivers the sum total of the cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. This takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls. Thus, after manifesting variegatedness, the effulgent Mahatattva, which contains all the universes within itself, which is the root of all cosmic manifestations and which is not destroyed at the time of annihilation, swallows the darkness that covered the effulgence at the time of dissolution. The mode of goodness, which is the clear, sober state of understanding the personality of Godhead, and which is generally called Vasudeva or consciousness, becomes manifest in the Mahatattva. After the manifestations of the Mahatattva, these features appear simultaneously as water in its natural state before coming in contact with the earth is clear, sweet, and unruffled. So, the characteristic traits of pure consciousness are complete serenity, clarity, and freedom from distraction. The material ego springs up from the Mahatattva, which evolved from the Lord's own energy. The material ego is endowed predominantly with active power of three kinds: good, passionate, and ignorant. It is from these three types of material ego that the mind, the senses of perception, the organs of action, and the gross elements evolve. The threefold Ahankara, the source of the gross elements, the sense, and the mind, is identical with them because it is their cause. It is known by the name of the Sankarshana, who is directly Lord Ananta with thousands held. This false ego is characterized as the doer, as an instrument, and as an effect. It is further characterized as serene, active, or dull according to how it is influenced by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. From the false ego of goodness, another transformation takes place. From this evolves the mind, whose thoughts and reflections give rise to desire. The mind of the living entity is known by the name of the Lord Aniruddha, the supreme ruler of the senses. He possesses bluish black form resembling a lotus flower growing in the autumn. He is found slowly by the yogis. By transformations of the false ego in passion, intelligence takes birth. O virtuous lady, the functions of the intelligence are to help in ascertaining the nature of objects when they come into view and to help the senses.
Very nice. Okay, you want to turn it over at this time?
Prabhuji, my wife wants to read a couple of.
Oh, surely, please. Yes, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Doubt, misapprehension, correct apprehension, memory, and sleep, as determined by their different functions, are said to be the distinct characteristics of intelligence. Egoism, in the mode of passion, produces two kinds of senses: the senses for acquiring knowledge and senses for action. The senses of action depend on the vital energy, and the senses for acquiring knowledge depend on intelligence. When egoism in ignorance is agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the subtle element sound is manifested, and from the sound come the ethereal sky and the sense of hearing. Persons who are learned and who have true knowledge define sound as that which conveys the idea of an object, indicates the presence of a speaker screened from our view, and constitutes the subtle form of the ether. The activities and the characteristics of ethereal element can be observed as the accommodation of room for the external and internal existences of all living entities, namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind. From ethereal existence, which evolves from sound, the next transformation takes place under the impulse of time, and thus the subtle element touch, and hence the air and the sense of touch become prominent. Softness and hardness, and the cold and the heat are the distinguishing attributes of touch, which is characterized as a subtle form of air. The action of air is exhibited in movements, mixing, allowing approach to the objects of sound and other sense perceptions, and providing for the proper functioning of all other senses. By interactions of air and the sensations of touch, one receives different forms according to destiny. By evolution of such forms, there is fire, and the eye sees different forms in color. My dear mother, the characteristics of form are understood by dimension, quality, and individuality. The form of fire is appreciated by its effulgence. Fire is appreciated by its light and by its ability to cook, to digest, to destroy cold, to evaporate, and to give rise to hunger, thirst, eating, and drinking. By the interaction of the fire and the visual sensation, the subtle element taste evolves under a superior arrangement. From taste, water is produced, and the tongue, which perceives the taste, is also manifested. Although originally one, taste becomes manifold as astringent, sweet, bitter, pungent, sour, and salty due to contact with other substances. The characteristics of water are exhibited by its moistening other substances, coagulating various mixtures, causing satisfaction, maintaining life, softening things, driving away heat, incessantly supplying itself to reservoirs of water, and refreshing by slaking thirst. Due to the interaction of water with the taste perception, the subtle element order evolves under superior arrangement. Hence, the earth and the olfactory sense, by which we can variously experience the aroma of the earth, become manifest. Order, although one, becomes many as mixed, offensive, fragrant, mild, strong, acidic, and so on, according to the proportions of associated substances. The characteristics of the functions of earth can be perceived by the modeling forms of Supreme Brahman, by construction places of residence, by preparing pots to contain water, etc. In other words, the earth is the place of sustenance for all elements. The sense whose object of perception is sound is called the auditory sense, and that whose object of perception is touch is called the tactile sense. The sense whose object of perception is form, the distinctive characteristic of fire, is the sense of sight. The sense whose object of perception is taste, the distinctive characteristic of water, is known as the sense of taste. Finally, the sense whose object of perception is order, the distinctive characteristic of earth, is called the sense of smell. Since the cause exists in its effect as well, the characteristics of the former are observed in the latter. That is why the peculiarities of all the elements exist in the earth alone. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you. You know, Sudevi, are you able to find where we are located? And we also have, I believe we have Kalindi with us tonight, Devidasi. Is that correct? And if you'd like to read, you're welcome to read also. Sudev, if you'd like to read a little bit, why don't you take 10 or so? And then Kalindi, if you'd like to read, you should read 10 or so.
Okay.
I think we have about 20 left, maybe.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for being here, by the way. What an honor to have you.
Sorry, I came late.
Hare Krishna, Kalindi.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol. Lovely
Oh.
to join us.
Very good.
That's our friends from Hot Springs.
I know a little bit about her because it seems like she was kind enough to present us with some beautiful deities, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're my hero. There's no question about it.
That's my husband, not me. I'm just the assistant.
You're his better half, so it's really you. He's just helping you out.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
just dropped him off at the airport, so he's going to China again.
Wow. Well, maybe
Yeah.
he'll bring us some more beautiful deities. Let's see.
I don't know.
Yeah, please read a few and leave a few for our Sue Davy, our illustrious Guyanese devotee. She's down in
Okay.
Guyana.
Oh
Yeah.
wow. You want me to read now? Okay.
Yep, please.
That's 50, yeah? When all these elements were unmixed, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the origin of creation, along with time, work, and the qualities of the most material nature, entered into the universe with a total material energy in 7 divisions. From these 7 principles, roused into activity and united by the presence of the Lord, an unintelligent egg arose, from which appeared the celebrated cosmic being. This universal egg, or the universe in the shape of an egg, is called the manifestation of material energy. Its layers of water, air, fire, sky, ego, and Mahatattva increase in thickness one after another. Each layer is 10 times bigger than the previous one, and the final outside layer is covered by Pradhan. Within this egg is the universal form of Lord Hari, in whose body the 14 planetary systems are parts. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Virat Purusha, situated himself in that golden egg, which was lying on the water, and he divided it into many departments. First of all, a mouth appeared in him, and then came forth the organ of speech, and with it the god of fire, the deity who presides over that organ. Then a pair of nostrils appeared, and in them appeared the olfactory sense, as well as prana, the vital air. In the wake of the olfactory sense came the wind god, who presides over that sense. Thereafter a pair of eyes appeared in the universal form, and in them the sense of light. In the wake of this sense came the sun god, who presides over it. Next there appeared in him a pair of ears, and in them the auditory sense, and in his wake the Devatas, or the deities who preside over the directions. Then the universal form of the Lord, the Virat Purusha, manifested his skin, and thereupon the hair, moustache, and beard appeared. After this, all the herbs and drugs became manifested, and then his genitals also appeared. After this, the semen, the faculty of procreation, and the god who presides over the waters appeared. Next appeared an anus, and then the organs of defecation, and thereupon the god of death, who is feared throughout the universe. Thereafter, the 2 hands of the universal form of the Lord became manifested, and with them the power of grasping and dropping things. And after that, Lord Indra appeared. Next, the legs became manifested, and with them the process of movement. And after that, Lord Vishnu appeared.
Okay. Glendy, thank you very, very much for that. So nice to have you with us. So happy. I think if we can let Sue Dave read these last ones, we will be finished with the next 12, and then we can discuss. Okay.
Hare.
With us?
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
The vein of the universe, the universal body became manifested, and thereafter the red corpuscles or blood, in their wake came the river, the deities presiding over the vein, and then appear an abdomen. Next grew feelings of hunger and thirst, and in their wake came the manifestation of the ocean. Then a heart became manifested, and in the wake of the heart, the mind appeared. After the mind, the moon appeared, intelligent appeared next, and after intelligent, Lord Brahma appeared, then the false ego appeared, and then Lord Shiva, and after the appearance of Lord Shiva came consciousness, and the deity preside over consciousness. When the demigod and the presiding deities of the various senses were thus manifested, they wanted to awake their origin of appearance, but upon failing to do so, they re-entered the body of the Virat Purusha one after another in order to awake him. The god of fire entered the mouth with the organ of speech, but the Virat Purusha could not be aroused. Then the god of wind entered his nostril with the sense of smell, but still the Virat Purusha refused to be awakened. The sun god entered the eyes of the Virat Purusha with the sense of sight, but still the Virat Purusha did not get up. Similarly, the predominating deity of the direction entered through his ears with the sense of hearing, but still he did not get up. The predominating deity of the skin, herbs, and seasoning plant enter the skin of the Virat Purusha with the hair of the body, but the cosmic being refused to get up even then. The god predominating over water enter his organ of generation with the faculty of procreation, but the Virat Purusha still would not rise. The god of death entered his anus with the organ of defecation, but the Virat Purusha could not be spurred to activity. The god Indra entered the hands with their power of grasping and dropping things, but the Virat Purusha would not get up even then. The Lord Vishnu entered his feet with the faculty of locomotion, but the Virat Purusha refused to stand up even then. The river entered his blood vessels with the blood and the power of circulation, but still cosmic being could not be made to stir. The ocean entered his abdomen with hunger and thirst, but the cosmic being refused to raise even then. The moon god entered his heart with the mind, but the cosmic being could not be aroused. Brahma also entered his heart with intelligence, but even then the cosmic being could not be prevailed upon to get up. Lord Rudra also entered his heart with the ego, but even then the cosmic being did not stir. However, when the inner controller, the deities presiding over consciousness, entered the heart with reason, at that very moment the cosmic being arose from the causal water. When a man is sleeping, all his material assets namely the vital energy, the senses for recording knowledge, the senses for working, the mind and the intelligence cannot arouse him. He can be aroused only when the super soul help him. Then, therefore, through devotion, detachment, and advancement in spiritual knowledge acquired through concentration, concentrated devotional service, one should contemplate that super soul as present in this very body, although simultaneously apart from it. Hare Krishna. Oh, it's finished?
Yes,
Hare
those 2
Krishna.
chapters are now complete. We still have about 3 sets of 2 chapters to go to finish the Kapila incarnation. But that was very nice reading, everybody. Kalindi, so nice to have you here. Sudev, so nice that you're here with us too. We've been missing. I missed a call from Sudev the other day. I'm sorry about that. We can talk later. So yeah, so there.
This song like the Genesis in the Bible. This song like the Genesis in the Bible when God created the world in 7 days.
Right. Right. This is the creation of the Mahatatma Navrata Rupa. Now, we've already read about that in the previous canto, and there was great descriptions of the Virata Rupa in the second canto as well. So the Virata Rupa is this great universal form that we're all involved in. It's the embodiment of the universe. It's the Lord's actual body. It's a understanding. There's no actual body like that. Not really, but we see depictions of that in the Vedas where they show this. It's almost like a transformer. Has anybody seen the movie Transformers? It's this gigantic Virata Rupa body, and it shows all the 14 planetary systems within his body and all this amazing activity. And all the demigods are in control of those very aspects of the Lord's senses within the material world. And those demigods carry out those functions of death under the directions of the Lord. They carry out all of the functions that are involved from Indra, Varuna, Agni, the fire god. I mean, if we look at all of that, they're all here representing the Lord perfectly. And they carry out his mission in this material world as he desires. So this explanation by Kapila is to make us aware of the Mahatattva and also to remind us of the Virat Purusha. And but if you look at it, it ends with devotion at the end of the chapter. So if we look at the last verse, it says, therefore, through devotion, detachment, and advancement in spiritual knowledge acquired through concentrated devotional service, one should contemplate that super soul is present in this very body, although simultaneously apart from it. So the super soul has entered every literally atom, living, moving, not moving, whatever it might be. The Lord is there. And all of these things are taking place at his direction. Bhagavad Gita says that very, very carefully. I'm the creator. Everything emanates from me, and everything is strung on me as pearls on a thread, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. So we understand that this is mystical knowledge or information. Sankhya philosophy literally is the study of turning over every rock and finding God there, seeing God in everything. And it's very, very similar to what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita in the universal form, where he describes how he can be known. I'm the taste of water, the light of the sun, the moon, this and that. But we can see that the Lord has entered into these things and empowered these demigods. Now, the demigods were trying to wake him up, and they couldn't seem to wake him up until the very end. And then the Lord finally entered the heart, and the great Virata Rupa became functional and manifest at that time. So that's pretty interesting stuff in this chapter. That's very detailed information, and it would require years of study, and one should read every single purport involved in this particular chapter, because it really will help you become Krishna conscious and understand how to see God in this world that we're living in. Everything we see is God. There's nothing that exists that is not God. In India, when they go namaste, what they're saying is, I recognize the eternal super soul within your body, where your soul is existing. So they see beyond the body. The whole concept of yoga is to identify with the soul and not this material body, which is our illusion. So that's the whole purpose of yoga. If you look at the complete science of yoga in the Bhagavad Gita, it contains Ashtanga yoga, Karma yoga, Jnana yoga or Sankhya yoga, and Bhakti yoga. And at the end of it all, Krishna explains is that Bhakti yoga is the only thing that really gets his attention. Everything else is very difficult, hard to obtain, and can be easily lost, whereas Bhakti yoga not. So when Krishna says in the knowledge of absolute truth in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, I shall now declare to you in full this knowledge, both nominal and phenomenal, and after knowing which, nothing further shall remain for you to know. What a bold statement that is. Has anyone ever made a statement like that? No. Only God can make a statement like that. No one can make a statement like that. So when we hear what Kapila is teaching in the Sankhya philosophy, we'll realize that it's the same philosophy that Krishna is teaching in Bhagavad Gita. It's the same philosophy that all pure devotees have realized, have adhered to, and transcended this material mortal coil at the time of death and re-entered into the spiritual sky, into the spiritual strata, where we live forever, never die, never grow old, and the pleasure actually begins. There's no pleasure here in this dark material world. There's only cessation of miseries. You can say, no, I'm achieving a lot of pleasure. So hunger is a pleasure, right? Yeah, but it's also a great misery, isn't it? If you think about it. If you're really hungry, you're really miserable, right? So you may eat some nice food, but then shortly afterward, you'll need more food. So there's no end to that. No end to it. You'll die hungry. You're born hungry and you'll die hungry. Same thing for any of the senses in the material world. We can pursue those senses, but we should understand what those senses are actually meant to be used for. They're meant to be engaged in the service of Hrishikesh, the master of the senses. Those senses are a gift to you. They don't belong to you. Everything you see does not belong to you. Your family does not belong to you. Your nation does not belong to you. The body you live in does not belong to you. It is provided to you by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in these various divisions, how he divides himself unlimitedly, actually to serve us, believe it or not. This is what Krishna, we just read this in the last chapter, that Krishna is actually providing the greatest service. No one can be as good a servant as Krishna. No one can be as great a servant as Krishna. No one can understand the mind of Krishna. No one can truly understand these things. However, he says in the chapter of the Absolute, after he says that you shall know that, he says that, but out of many, many thousands among men, who may endeavor for perfection, hardly one even knows me in truth. Why? Because the sampradaya is regularly broken, and the science of Godhead as it is appears to be lost again and again. Prichanaya saranam vinashaya chadurshkrita. Dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge. So Krishna comes again and again, millennium after millennium, to reestablish. Kapila is one of those incarnations who is coming to reestablish the truth. The truth is one, right? The guru is one. So we may say, well, what does that mean? Well, the strand where the pearls are strong is one thing. Everything is on that strand, and that strand is the truth. That is Krishna. We're all strung on that strand. So if we understand the Vedas, Krishna says, by the Vedas, by all the Vedas, I am to be known. And we can know Krishna. As a matter of fact, in Bhagavad Gita, he says that he can be known standing before you. He can be understood standing before you, and thus can be seen directly. And in Bhagavad Gita, it says, I give Arjuna, he says, I give you divine eyes to see this. And he's done that over and over again throughout Srimad Bhagavatam. So the Lord wants you to know him. He wants you to be with him. That loving relationship that we've left, Prabhupada said, why would we have ever left? And somebody asked Prabhupada, they said, why would we have ever left the spiritual sky? What sense does that even make? I mean, you're in absolute paradise, eternal life, Satchidananda Vigraha body. No problem, no pain, no suffering. Everything's desire tree. Everything is touchstone. Nothing could be wanted. All your desires are fulfilled. And yet you want to leave Krishna, separate from Krishna, and come to the material world where you can try futilely, birth after death, over and over and over again, to become Krishna. So Krishna said in this chapter, he says, my devotees don't want to become one with me. My devotees don't even want salvation. They don't even want it. They don't want the mystic powers. They don't want them. They don't want to go to Brahmaloka. They don't want to be Indra with 20,000 beautiful apsaras singing. That would be a great distraction, potentially. They just want to remember Krishna life after life, birth after birth, in any condition that Krishna determines how their relationship can be improved and grow. So the chapter that we had read not too long ago, who was it who said, I just want to remain a kind friend to all living entities, life after life. I'm not asking you for anything. The Lord appeared before him. He said, not asking for anything. All I want is to remember you life after life. So if we go back through these chapters a little, or through these verses a little bit, is there any questions so far? Any comments anybody wants to make? I don't mean to suck all the air out of the room here. But if we go back, there's a few verses I'd like to go over with you real quick because we're going to stop at 8:15. So we have a few more minutes. So stop me if you have anything. I'm going to rush through this with you a little bit because I've got quite a bit that I'd like to talk to you about. So if you go back to text 1 in chapter 25, the glories of devotional service. And by the way, most of the information in here corresponds with that chapter in the Bhagavad Gita of devotional service. You can find all that by reading through that chapter in the Bhagavad Gita. But the first text where Kapila says, wait a minute, it's chapter, text 1, it says, that the Supreme Personality of Godhead took birth as Kapila Muni by his internal potency. He descended to disseminate transcendental knowledge for the benefit of the whole human race. Now, that reminds me of how the Bhagavatam starts when it says, Idam Bhagavatam Nama. You might know that verse, Srimad Bhagavatam 1:340. Puranam Brahma Samitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi. So what he says is that this Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God, and it is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. So this information is the what Krishna says, there is nothing, once you understand this information, there's nothing further that shall remain for you to know. He also says that in the 9th chapter where he says, Raja Vijay Raja Guyam Pavidram Itamutamam Pratyak Shavagamam Dharmyam Sasukam Kartamavyayam, that this is the most confidential knowledge. It's the most secret of all secrets. And because it is the perfection of religion, it gives direct perception of the self by realization. It is everlasting and it is joyfully performed. So if we go down through these verses, we'll see that the second verse rather, it says, this is the chapter 25 I'm talking about. There's no one that knows more than the Lord himself, right? He's the most mature yogi of all. He is Yogeshwara. Yogeshwara. In other words, he is the creator of yoga. He is the purpose of yoga. He delineates the yoga system. He reestablishes the yoga system. Why? Yoga means to reconnect, connect with God. Reconnect with God. So the Lord can tell us through these pure devotees in disciplic succession, evam parampara praptam, we can learn the absolute truth from perfected souls who are following perfect information. And in that way, we can become perfected, even in this life. We can see God, we can know God, and we can have a relationship with God. Krishna explains that in Bhagavad Gita, and this will be explained actually in the next chapter, not the next one, but the one after the next chapter, where Krishna discusses that very, very carefully. He reveals to Devahuti all of the information of Sankhya Yoga. So Devahuti, she is sick of the disturbances of her senses, right? She's sick of it. So it says that it's very difficult for a person to get out of the material world if they're not just sick of it. So one of the great aspects of devotional life is to be constantly aware of the problem of birth, death, old age, and disease. We have to be aware of that. We're not negative. Some people say the devotees are negative because they talk about death. You better talk about death. It's coming. It's the one thing that you can guarantee you may have to pay taxes too, right? Death and taxes. But you're definitely going to die. And so what's going to happen at the time of death? Your whole life is designed to prepare you for that exact moment. And Krishna says that one who leaves this body thinking of him alone attains to his nature without fail. Krishna explains that. So we want to prepare ourselves. As Srimad Bhagavatam is designed to prepare us. At the end of most of every chapter that we read, or at least every story of the incarnation, it says that anyone who understands God in this way and has some genuine affection for the Lord in this way will come home in due course of time, back home, back to Godhead. He says that over and over. Just we read that in the Varaha chapter recently. We're going to be reading that in the next chapters that come up about Kapila as well. So Devahuti was sick of the disturbances of her senses. Now, guys, practically, if you stop and think about it, hunger is a disturbance. Sex life, the urge for sex life, is a disturbance, right? And is there any satisfying these things ultimately? No. So what happens? The disturbance grows more and more and more, and it becomes an obsession. And then what happens, that obsession leads us to total frustration. And once we're completely frustrated, the next step is anger or madness, which will devour the whole world. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna asked him, what is the problem? Why is our mind carried away? As if like some cloud being blown through the sky. Even of a person of discretion who is attempting to control it. Krishna said, it is lust only, Arjuna, the all-devouring enemy of the world. It must be conquered by all means. So this Srimad Bhagavatam is the means. It is the very purpose. It is the very conquest, Prabhupada says in the beginning. This is the very conquest. And so by studying this conquest and introducing this conquest to society at large, who has no indication at this time of who is God, what is God, where does God live, who does God hang out with, who's his girlfriend, who's his wife, how many incarnations did he come? Just in this one, cycle of Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam's been respoken again and again and again. So has Bhagavad Gita. Krishna said, I spoke to the sun god. Arjuna said, I can't understand. Sun god, senior by birth to you. How could you speak to him? Krishna explains. many, many births both of you and I have had taken, but I can remember, but you cannot. So Krishna is very, very clear that there's an annihilation at the end of every day of Lord Brahma. Everything is taken back into the body. And at the great annihilation, it's all taken back in. So if that's the case, we are forgetful. These things have to be reestablished. Brahma has to reestablish all of this and recreate all this over and over again. So this is that's why we don't take pleasure. Matra sparsastikantaya. We don't take pleasure in the senses in the material world, because the pleasure here is temporary, right? Temporary. And it is the source, actually, of our misery, is partaking in these pleasures. Now, we can't understand that. We think that this doesn't make a lot of sense. But Krishna is very careful to explain, Brahma bhuvanalaka, Pranar arvartin orjuna, Mamu petya tukantaya, Pranar janmana vidyate. Even from Brahma Loka down to the lowest planet, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. Who wants that? Who's after that? Nobody. So, Bahunam let's see, Bahunam Janmanamante, that's it. Sorry, I got tongue-tied. Yanavan Mang Prapadyate, Vasudeva Sarvamiti, Samahatma Sadurava. So after many, many births and deaths, whoever is actually in knowledge and surrenders to me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is, such a great soul is very rare. So how many people do you think have actually heard the Brahma Samhita, the first verse of Brahma Samhita? How many people out in the world do you even think have ever even heard that? These are the first words of Lord Brahma in the Brahma Samhita. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. So we know that Krishna is one without a second. He's the cause of all causes. There is no cause superior to Krishna. There's nothing beyond Krishna. Krishna is the source of all the incarnations, of all the Mahatattva, of all the Virata Rupa, of all the demigods, of all the heavenly Vaikuntha planets, of Goloka Vrindavan, of everybody who's in those planets. He's the soul of our soul. He's the creator of our soul. Literally, we're expansions from him, parts and parcels, qualitatively one when we're purified, but never quantitatively one. So you can try to be God all you want, but you can't even create a drop of water. You can't create an egg like he did, this egg of the universe. You can't do that. What can you do? I mean, we can produce stool and urine. That's what we do. So what else can you do? What else can you do? Literally. You may be a tiny creator because you're part and parcel of Krishna. But until you give it all back to Krishna, it is the source of your demise and your repeated birth and death. Until you give it all back to Krishna. That's the idea. So if we go through some of these other verses quickly, I wanted to be sure that I covered a couple of these things with you. So Krishna talks about the highest yoga system. Kapila talks about the highest yoga system. Krishna says the one who does devotional service, he is the highest yoga, most intimately united with me in devotion, right? So we know what the highest yoga system is, and Kapila's delineated that in this chapter also. By the way, one of the things in text 18 that I thought was pretty cool to make a note of, go up to text 18 in the same chapter. Let me click up here to it. It says, one then sees everything in its right perspective. So once you see everything in its right perspective, you naturally become indifferent to material existence. Some people think that terrible things are good. Isn't that weird? How we get so perverted in this world that some people think that the most heinous act is wonderful. Hunter thinks killing taking life is wonderful, right? It's a heinous act, but he's somehow or another become attached to it. Someone is eating some flesh of some creature, some beast somewhere, and they're thinking, oh, this is wonderful. I mean, who is the first person who saw the beast and thought, boy, you would be delicious? Have you ever walked out in the woods and seen a creature out there and thought, man, I can't wait to eat you? How ridiculous is this situation? No one would do that. Oh, yeah, I want to cut your head off and take your guts out and roast your flesh over a fire, and then I'm going to eat it. Who came up with that concept? Where did that come from? I mean, that just doesn't even make sense at all. So, but people do think that killing and the eating and partaking of flesh is wonderful, right? They do. Otherwise, why are there hundreds of thousands of slaughterhouses and millions of animals going to their death every day for the satisfaction of an unsatisfied tongue? To say satisfaction of an unsatisfied tongue is an oxymoron. It's not possible. So what I've found is that Krishna says that, so you're going to become less powerfully acted upon by the influence of the material nature when you see things in their right perspective. And the only way you can ever see things in the right perspective is by the mercy of the devotee of the Lord, or the Lord himself. And in that situation, you can understand the Lord because you've been engaged in devotional service. And Krishna says, or Kapila says here, for that's the only auspicious path. That's what Krishna or Kapila had to say. So in text 20, it says, every learned man knows very well that attachment for the material nature is the greatest entanglement of the spiritual soul. But that same attachment, when applied to the self-realized devotees, opens the door of liberation. So Prabhupada gave an example. A knife can be used to kill someone, or a knife can be used to save someone. Like a surgeon may have to use the knife to cut out a cancer or something to save your life. But the murderer will use the knife to kill you to take your possessions. A kind man will cut fruit and offer it to others after offering to Krishna. So the knife itself is not good or bad. It's what you do with the knife. And so the idea is to apply everything in the service of the Lord, and it becomes the source of your liberation. And he goes on to say that we need to give up all unfavorable things and accept all favorable things for the service of the Lord. So it's not that you give up your family. You don't give up your children. I mean, unless they're completely nonsense. I mean, I don't know how that works, but we do see that divorce rates are 84%. So somebody's giving up somebody, but they're doing it for sense gratification. What we're saying is no, everything should be engaged in the service of the Lord. Nabudhi Bedam Janayed, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, don't disturb the mind of the ignorant, but instead engage them in the ways of devotion. The ways of devotion are liberating. The same activities you're doing today, you can do for Krishna, and all of a sudden now that's the answer to the riddle of perpetual birth and death. So we're going to be kind friends to all living entities. We're going to have no enemies. We don't have any enemies. We're going to become attached to the holy men. And that counteracts the pernicious effects of the material attachments that we see. We're going to be engaged in constant hearing and chanting of the Lord. We're going to get our delight by becoming attached to those stories instead of sitcom stories or some nonsense fiction stories, or listening to the news. How many people were murdered today for no reason? How much do you want to hear that for? Well, there's nothing really there. That's just a place of pilgrimage for crows, Prabhupada says. A place of pilgrimage for crows. To read this nonsense literature to see these nonsense shows, to go to these nonsense cinema shows that have no value and distract us from the true meaning of life. That's the idea. So we want to purify our life. We want to accept those things. Yama niyama is first process in the eightfold mystic path of yoga. Yama niyama. Give up the bad stuff, take the good stuff for the Lord. So we become attached to the holy men, and in their association, we delight in discussing topics of the Lord and his pastimes. And that actually reduces the suffering in the material world. He says that in the verse. Which one was that? He says, I can't remember which one it is now. But it actually reduces the suffering of the condition of our existence because we're in a state of happiness. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been in pain and all of a sudden you've been distracted by something? You forgot about the pain during that distraction, right? Or let's say you're driving down the road and you're in your car and you don't even see the road. You don't even know how you've been driving an hour. You haven't seen a thing. You've gone inside your own self and your mind has carried you off into another place. During that period of time, you didn't even know the road existed. So devotional service works the same way. Ultimately, we want jhana. We want to be able to meditate on the Lord in the way that it's described here. In these next chapters, it describes very carefully how we should meditate on the person God. And by doing that, we can enter into literally a state of samadhi, even in this life, if we can just keep it going as an endless loop. In our dreams, in daytime, you can have Krishna as the backdrop for every single activity and every single thing that you are doing in life. And even though we may not have a taste at first, by giving up these activities, the taste remains. But by giving up these activities, gradually we get a higher taste. And that higher taste will be the thing that will deliver us at the time of death. Because wherever you're thinking of at the time of death, that you will attain without fail. There's no question. So you want to fix your mind on these stories of God. The adventures and the pastimes of the Lord are wonderful, and they're unlimited here. So the Sankhya system that he described is devotional service, and it also contains this analytical study to understand the mystical side of how God appeared, and that's what's being described right now. Is some of this mystical understanding that we want. So we have something, and listen to this, guys. I guess I'll end it this way. I got so much more to go, but I don't want to keep you guys. So the one thing that we could end it with, if you'd like, I don't know if everybody's ready to get on with the next thing they got to do tonight. But it says in text 32, the mind's natural duty is to serve. And when that same service spirit is engaged in devotional service to personality of Godhead without any motive, that is far better than even salvation. Because, and Rangamati asked me to mention this, text 33, Bhakti, devotional service, dissolves the subtle body of the living entity without any separate effort. So when he says without separate effort, we're talking about you get all the mystic siddhas without separate effort. You get all the benedictions of the Lord without separate effort. You don't have to worry about your salvation. That's automatically included in the package of love of God and devotional service. All the things that your heart could ever want and dream of, all included. You don't have to go at them separately and try to do business with God to get some power over this material world, which you're bound to lose. So this is hardly worth your time. That's why it says these other types of yoga are very troublesome, and they can be quite confusing, especially trying to meditate on the unmanifest. Who could do that? Nobody's ever done that. How could you meditate on the unmanifest? I mean, it's just kind of another oxymoron. We don't know how that's possible. But Bhakti dissolves the subtle body just like eating food. The fire of digestion dissolves the food and turns it into energy. in the body. So this bhakti, the subtle body we're talking about, Rangabody, I don't know where you are now, you fell off the recording. But the subtle body that we're talking about is the mind, intelligence, false ego, right? So the false ego is all about, quote, I, unquote, mine, quote, mine, unquote. Nothing is I, nothing is mine. Everything belongs to Krishna. And we're here to serve the Lord. And by doing that, we'll achieve all of the goals that we could ever possibly have, that separately endeavoring we will never, ever achieve. Ultimately, we'll achieve frustration. And you see the result of that in today's modern society, which is headlong, like the moth flying into the flame of sense gratification. More sex, more drugs, more this, more that, more gluttony, more food, more different kinds of things, more different types of entertainment, violence. People love this stuff. And it's all it's doing is distracting us from our true goal in life, which is to learn to love God. So bhakti, tivrena bhakti yogena, intense. You know what tivrena means? It means intense. Bhakti yoga. It means intense devotional service to the Lord is what's required for us to get out of here. And by the way, those benedictions that the Lord gives, they can never be lost. They're perpetually with the devotee. This is guaranteed in text 38 by the Lord. And he says in text 37 that doesn't matter. You get all the boons, all the benedictions as a side benefit without even having to desire them. And on text 39, and I will leave you with this one for sure. Text 39, it says, for a person who gives up all aspirations for anything, to be happy in the material world, for any of the aspirations, he says that aspirations in relationship to the material body, which is destined to be stool, dust, or ash. It talks about the body is destined to be eaten by dogs. This is what the body is for. So we can print it up, we can do what we want to with it, but ultimately it will be eaten by dogs and jackals and other animals. So it says, but for a person who's willing to give up anything in relationship to the body and offer it back to the Lord, I take him to the other side of birth and death. Krishna says in text 39 and 40 in this chapter. So text 41 through 43 is a declaration of God, from God. You can hear exactly what he has to say. He says, I am the Almighty Lord. There can be no doubt I'm the Almighty Lord. I'm the only shelter. I'm the original source of all creation, the supreme soul of all souls. He said everything is going on out of fear of me. Everything. Fire burns out of fear. All of that. Death goes on taking its toll out of fear. So the yogis equipped with transcendental knowledge and renunciation engage in devotional service for their own eternal benefit. Think about it. They take shelter of the Lord's lotus feet, and thus they are eligible to enter into the kingdom of God without any fear. That's why it's called Vayakunta. There's no fear there, free from anxiety. So therefore, persons whose mind are fixed on the Lord engage in intensive practice. Tivrena, if you look at the Sanskrit on this verse, it's Tivrena Bhakti Yogena. And that means intensive practice of devotional service, which is the only means for attainment for the final perfection of life. Hare Krishna. Any questions, comments? I mean, we could go on for a few more days, but I've got my notes. They'll be in the book. You'll see them. I'm not going to cover it all tonight because it's just too much, but I think you can appreciate. Kalindi, do you have any questions? Sudev, do you have any? There's Nishinga. Everybody's good?
Everybody who, Hare Krishna, everybody who come to Krishna consciousness, who initiate with Prabhupada, they have enough information for carry through them for the rest of their life. They have no time to waste doing other stuff.
Well, you're right, because everybody's walking off the cliff right now. And if we're at least somewhat compassionate, we just go over and go, hey, don't. The first step is a doozy. You got to stop that. You're not looking at your steps. You're taking the wrong steps. You're being distracted by the material energy, and you're about to walk off into the great abyss. So the devotees are kind souls. All they want to do is give this information out. They don't need your money. They don't need anything you got. If you give it to them, they're going to engage it in Krishna's service if they're actual devotees. So those are the devotees you want to become attached to. Those are the devotees you want to associate with. Those are the devotees you want to hear from and discuss these wonderful activities of Krishna with, which are enlivening in themselves and satisfying completely to the soul. And the only thing that will actually satisfy the soul. So there you go.
And if I'm not mistaken, the last set of verses that was read talks about how Krishna make up this whole body and this whole everything, the mechanism of the soul and the body, how it make up. Am I right?
Yeah, that's called the Virata Rupa, the Mahatattva. Yeah. Those are described also in the other two cantos we've been reading. There are multiple explanations of that and different angles of it from different perspectives. So it's a wonderful thing to read, but the Virata Rupa is an imaginary form of the Lord, just so that we can understand. God, he is in everything. He's imbued, everything is marinated in God. There's nothing that is not of God or from God. Everything that we see here. So it's one way to meditate on the Lord, but in the next chapters, you'll see that the meditation needs to go beyond the material world to the spiritual world and to meditate on God in his original spiritual forms, which will produce liberation, even without wanting it, as a side benefit to devotional service.
That bring me to an understanding how God come into Arjuna and give him full authority to do what he had to do. What a wonderful discussion that should be.
And the interesting thing about that, Sue Dave, we read not too long ago that when Arjuna was finished with the battle of Kurukshetra and went to see Krishna in Dwarka and saw that Krishna had already left, he came back completely dejected. And he had none of these powers anymore. His power had all been removed when Krishna left. And he was defeated by peasants, even though he had the same chariot, the same weapons, the same armor, everything. He got defeated by the lowest of men. So Krishna is the ability in man. He says in Bhagavad Gita, I am the ability in man. So how can we be so proud of borrowed plumes? To think, oh, look at me, how good I am, whatever. That's why when you hear the songs of Narottam Das Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta, all these great devotees, the first thing they say is, I'm the lowest of mankind. I have no qualification, no attachment to the holy name. And really, I come to you completely in shame before you, Lord, and beg your mercy upon me. Krishna is everything to us. And you can try to enjoy him separately by taking a spark of his splendor and trying to be a miser and contain it in a box or contain it in your life or somehow. But until you give Krishna away, you don't really get Krishna. You got to give the Lord away. So that's what we're doing here today.
Then those people who has ego, thinking that everything they have belongs to them, that is really ego, and that is really a thief.
That's the cause of material existence. That's the cause. That's the false ego that we're talking about dissolving with Bhakti Yoga. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita in 19:14, Satatam kirtayanto mang yantantas cha vridhabraha. So what he's saying is always chanting my glories, always endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me. These great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. These are the people we need to be associating with. We need to find those persons who are perpetually bowing down before the Lord and worshiping the Lord with devotion. That's the key to this thing. So, guys, I'm sorry. It's 8:34. I promised I'd get you out of here. This always happens. I can't help it. If you have to go, go. If you have to go early, go.
Chanting is really, really important. If you don't chant, there is no guarantee you will remember him at the end of your life.
That's right. So chanting, reading, doing service to the Lord, becoming attached to the Lord's devotees, taking only prasadam, praying to the Lord, just like it said earlier, they talk to me in a favorable way. The Lord wants to talk to you. What's the problem? You don't have to pick up the phone. Just think it. The Lord knows what's in your mind. He's the super soul in your body. Just pray to the Lord, talk to the Lord, be with the Lord, worship the Lord, bow down before the Lord, and then certainly you will come to the Lord and you will end this perpetual wheel of samsara, birth, death, old age, and disease, suffering miserably in the material world, simply losing everything you thought you had over and over and over and over and over again until finally you're completely burned out with the material world. So we do want to be burned out with the material world, but we want to be so completely obsessed with Krishna that we forget this whole material world. We want to forget that material world time of death. We don't want to remember all this nonsense. We want to remember Krishna. So guys, thank you for this. And, Sudave, if you want to call anytime you can, Kalindi, thank you so much for being here to Shringa. Yeah, we love you guys and we're very grateful to you. Thanks for tuning in tonight. I'm going to end the call because it's going to get too long. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and end it. But Hare Krishna.
It is so nice to listen, the way you are speaking, and it is nice to listen, Prabhuji. It is
Thank
nice
you.
to listen continuously. Yes,
Very
thank you.
inspiring.
Thank you so
You
much.
can do a little kirtan as well.
Well,
very
she
good.
says we can hardly hear the kirtan, and that's why we quit doing the kirtan, because it was hard. Because I was doing kirtan for about 15 minutes before every program. We weren't getting enough philosophy in at the time, and nobody was really able to do a call and response on the go to meeting. But we will be doing a lot of kirtan separately from these classes, and we'll continue. I know Sue Davy loves the kirtan. She loves to chant so nicely, so that's a beautiful thing. So guys, thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same station, and we'll carry it on from here. Thank you for being here. Hari Bol.
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhuji.
Thank
Hare
you. Hare
Jai,
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.